You're here already, waiting. All right, chapter 4. As you recall, we ended the last chapter, chapter 3, with me wearing that fancy Bible school uniform. And here we are. What a delight to be with you in this wonderful outdoors. And starting off with chapter 4. Well, remember we were beginning to sense a call to prison ministry. It was, I believe, somewhere in the end of 85 or beginning of 86. Carol and I were sitting in a Sunday school class in our home church, the Broadview Evangelical Free Church in Salmon Arm, BC. And I was sitting, Carol was sitting beside me, and beside her was a gentleman that we had never seen before. We had never seen him in Sunday school. But there we were in the adult Sunday school class, and the Sunday school teacher said, let's have some suggestions. What might we do as a church to expand our ministry? And somebody piped up and said, well, maybe prison ministry? Whoa, my ears perked up. And I said, you know what? If I knew who the chaplain is at Kamloops Regional Correctional Center, I would contact him right away, and I would make an effort to start prison ministry. And the gentleman sitting beside Carol spoke up and he said, the chaplain of Regional Center in Kamloops is my personal friend. Whoa, you want to talk about God's timing? That's incredible. And I said, sir, could you possibly give me his phone number before we leave the church service this morning? He said, I sure could. So he did. We called him up and made an appointment with him to meet him at McDonald's in Kamloops. And we got there on time. Carol and I got there on time, and we sat and we waited and we waited and we waited. Ladies and gentlemen, I kid you not, we waited there for over 3 hours. And finally, we got him on the phone again and said, did you forget about our appointment? And he was so apologetic, but he came, and we had sat there at McDonald's for over 3 hours. Now, you talk about being serious about going into prison ministry. So he came, and we made contact. At that time, Kamloops Regional Correctional Center was still the old prison. And, of course, there's an abbreviation for that being KRCC. And that is where we started ministering in the prison in Kamloops. Now, the chaplain at Kamloops, he was a shantyman missionary. He knew about faith and trusting the Lord. But he was also a very, very fine songwriter. And today, in today's chapter, I want to sing a number of songs that he has written, because I think they're really, really good. And I'd like to start off with a song called The Solitary Christian. I think it's a great song. Oh, well, I woke up this morning just as sad as I could be, all alone and solitary at KRCC. And I cried, oh Lord, in the darkness, come set this captive free, all alone in solitary at KRCC. Well, I looked out of my window past the bar's security, and I saw the snowflakes falling just as far as my eyes could see. And I realized that Jesus came for sinners just like me, all alone in solitary at KRCC. On my knees I prayed to the God way up above, and I asked him to forgive me with his undying love. He will take your life and make you the man that you should be, not alone and solitary at KRCC. Now I know just what you are thinking. What a scam this story be, that a God way up in heaven could save a soul like me. Just lift your heart towards heaven and you will surely see why I'm not alone in solitary at KRCC. On my knees I prayed to the God way up above, and I asked him to forgive me with his undying love. He will take your life and make you the man that you should be, not alone and solitary at KRCC. Not alone and solitary at KRCC. You know, as I recall, the hole or isolation in KRCC in the wintertime was brutally cold. And some of the boys said they almost froze to death. It was so cold. The old prison was old and dilapidated. But that is where we had the privilege of starting prison ministry in Kamloops. Now, interestingly enough, the chaplain at Kamloops, he was also responsible for the chaplaincy at Bear Creek Camp, which was up at Clearwater, and he was also responsible for the Raleigh prison camp, which used to be an old military camp, and they had made it into a little prison camp. And so we had the privilege of, usually what would happen is we would check into a hotel on Saturday, and then we would drive up to Clearwater, to the Bear Creek Camp, which was out in the bush. We would do a service there on Saturday night, come back, check into the hotel, and the next morning we would go into KRCC and do a service, and then Sunday afternoon we would go to Raleigh and do a service, and that would be our circuit or our time spent in the Kamloops region. Well, I'll tell you, the little chapel at Raleigh Camp, now there's a special place. Carol and I really got to appreciate that little chapel. It was an old building, but they had remodeled it, made a little chapel out of it, and that little chapel was so special to me, I actually wrote a song. Now, that first song I sang was written by the chaplain, but this song I wrote about Raleigh Chapel. I would like to sing it for you. There's a chapel in the valley where the Thompson River winds. It's a part of a Raleigh prison where men their God can find. Grassy hills and all the pine trees help men know that God is real. As they pray and ask forgiveness, God in love their lives does heal. Volunteers and inmates will join their hearts in song. They gather there to worship God on Sunday afternoon. The chaplain is the leader as they lift their Jesus high. There's preaching, praying, singing as the time goes flying by. From time to time the families will join their loved ones too. For some it is the first time in church to share a pew. But soon they feel the love of God, His Spirit sure is there. At times the eyes will fill with tears as they learn that Jesus cares. Volunteers and inmates will join their hearts in song. They gather there to worship God on Sunday afternoon. The chaplain is the leader as they lift their Jesus high. There's preaching, praying, singing as the time goes flying by. Well, some folks go to church on Sundays dressed up oh so fine. Others once or twice a year, Easter or Christmas time. And really I've seen men in green wait with an anxious heart, sitting on the chapel steps and wait for church to start. Volunteers and inmates will join their hearts in song. They gather there to worship God on Sunday afternoon. The chaplain is the leader as they lift their Jesus high. There's preaching, praying, singing as the time goes flying by. There is preaching, praying, singing as the time goes flying by. So you might say now we had our foot in the door. We were having a regular place where we would go and visit in prison and present the gospel, and we were under the care of a wonderful, wonderful chaplain that really had a burden for lost souls and to reach out to these unfortunate people that had made wrong choices. Maybe some of them grew up in places where you might say they had no chance in life at all. But the chaplain reached out to them, and therefore it was easy for us to do the same, to follow in and do the services. What a joy it was. But still it was, okay, so our hearts are still stirring. We're looking for further involvement. And at one point we wrote a letter to quite a large prison ministry. We thought it would be good to operate under the auspices of an organization. And so we wrote this large prison ministry to ask whether we could in one way or another get involved in their ministry, in their overall picture. Unfortunately and sadly, we didn't even get a response back. We didn't even get a letter. Nothing. So, well, that wasn't the answer. So we looked further. The chaplain of Calgary Correctional Institute was actually a friend of Carol's family. As a matter of fact, this chaplain was a Salvation Army man, and he was stationed at one point in time in Portage-la Prairie. And Carol's family lived in Portage-la Prairie, attended the chapel where this man was stationed. And it was under his ministry that Carol got saved as a 7-year-old girl. And so we contacted him and started conversing with him and telling him about what the burden was on our hearts and how we desired to become involved in prison ministry and so on and so forth. And so what that connection did, it got us to the place where, okay, we needed to make a move. And so where are we going to move? We realized that in Alberta, there were a number of prisons relatively close together, not very far apart. And so we were considering where we would possibly make our home base for a greater prison ministry. Well, it was, the prairie blood was still in me. I'm still a prairie person, agricultural person at heart. And so I would like to, at this time, take you to a place where I think the scenery is just fantastic. And so that was a drawing factor. Now, I love the mountains, and British Columbia is wonderful. But because I had that prairie blood in me, I would like to show you some of the things, or one of the things, that drew us here. Now, it was the prisons. That were a number of prisons in close proximity, but also Alberta has marvelous scenery. Come with me. I'll show you something. I'm back. Well, we were talking about Rayleigh Chapel and what a beautiful place that was. What great times we had at KRCC. And we are just praying and thinking about what we should be doing, whether we should be moving, we had contacted the chaplain at Calgary Correctional Institute, and Carol had written lots of letters to people that possibly would believe in what we believed the Lord was laying on our hearts. And so we made a decision in 86. We made a decision to go full out, full time. It was going to be our high priority to be in prison ministry, and we moved to Linden, and wonderfully blessed we were to have that part-time job in BC, Manitoba, in Linden here, and we were just blessed. Connected with chaplain of the Calgary Correctional Institute, and he surely was a Salvation Army soul-saving man. And so it was wonderful to work together with him. And you know, the idea was to get people to get saved, to believe in Jesus Christ. And right now I would like to sing a song that, another song that the chaplain of KRCC wrote. It's called You Don't Know Nothing. Now I know that's fairly straightforward and direct, but once you're established in prison ministry, there's no point in beating around the bush. You might as well talk to these people straightforward. Here it is. You don't know nothing. In a lonely prison cell, a young man cries away his pain. He's forsaken by family and friends, so they say, and he's far from the Savior who cares just to pray. He don't know nothing until he knows him. You don't know nothing until you know Jesus. You don't know nothing until you know him. Until he's filled your life with his power from above, you won't know nothing until you've known him. You have tried all the things that this world has to give, and you found it left nothing but heartache and sin. Why not come to the Savior who wants you to live? You won't know nothing until you've known him. You don't know nothing until you know Jesus. You don't know nothing until you've known him. Until he's filled your life with his power from above, you won't know nothing until you've known him. Why don't you open your heart up to Jesus today? He will save you and give you forgiveness to stay. There he stands at the door of your heart. Won't you pray? You won't know nothing until you've known him. You don't know nothing until you know Jesus. You don't know nothing until you know him. Until he's filled your life with his power from above, you won't know nothing until you've known him. until He's filled your life with His power from above. You won't know nothing until you've known Him. Well, it was exciting to come to Alberta here and begin to see what was developing in visiting prisons and so on and so forth. As I mentioned earlier, we were considering the fact that prisons were relatively close. You know, within an hour we were to a number of different prisons, and then if we would go up to Edmonton and Fort Saskatchewan, well, that was a 3-hour drive, but nevertheless we were excited. And then the chaplain had this Western Prison Outreach organization going, and in that and under that umbrella he had started a Bible study at the Emmanuel Church in Calgary that was for street people, and so he asked me to lead that. And so once a week I would have the Bible study there, and once a month we would go to Edmonton, Fort Saskatchewan, Drumheller, Calgary, and we continued going back to KRCC and Rayleigh and Bear Creek for quite some time. And so we were busy, but we were enjoying it. The economic aspect of the ministry was still up for answers. We were looking for answers. And so we will just change location now, and we will close chapter 4 with one more song. Come with me to another location. I think, once again, very beautiful. You can see why we possibly would have chosen this beautiful place to move to. Let's join at another place. Wow. You know, what a joy it was to be connected with the chaplain of Calgary Correctional Institute and to do these Bible studies and going into the prison and so on. Well, we were started out in prison ministry. And when you are in prison ministry, then you meet people and you begin to have a heart for them, and you wonder, will I ever see them again? Will I ever see them in heaven? Here's another song written by the KRCC chaplain. Will I see you in heaven? I stood beside a graveside of a friend the other day, and remembered how we'd sit and talk and pass the time away. We talked about the land and where which streets are paved with gold. If we'd listen to the voice of God, that's where we would go. I wonder, will I see you up in heaven? I wonder, have I asked you this before? I really want to see you there with Jesus. Friend, will you be ready now to go? She was a lady of the night, and you could see her arms. The marks they left to remind her she'd told all of her charm. But when the call from heaven comes and says it's time to go, He doesn't care just what you've done, but who it is you know. I wonder, will I see you up in heaven? I wonder, have I asked you this before? I really want to see you there with Jesus. Oh, friend, will you be ready now to go? I'm looking for the time when we will walk those streets up there and sit around forever singing songs that fill the air. We'll spend our time just praising Jesus Christ, the Son of God, whose life and love and cleansing blood has brought us over there. I wonder, will I see you up in heaven? I wonder, have I asked you this before? I really want to see you there with Jesus. Oh friend, will you be ready now to go? You know, we were busy going up and down the highways and byways, going from one end of the country to the next. I sometimes now, when I think back to how we would be in Manitoba one time, and the next moment we would be in BC next day or two, and back and forth we would go ministering, and what a joy it was. It was just excitement. But of course there was still always this burden of finding support, soliciting for support for what we were doing, and so on. And so we continued on doing that. And in the next program we'll be talking about the early years. Chapter 5 talks about the early years and some of the issues that we went to and confronted. But I'd like to close this session with another song written by the KRCC chaplain, "Don't Leave Here Without Jesus." Well, you came here tonight with one thing on your mind. Your heart has been looking for some answers to find that will bring to an end all the fears you have known. Oh friend, don't you leave here without Jesus as your own. I don't care why you came to be here tonight, and I don't care if you're thinking I'm wrong or I'm right. But don't you be thinking about some place you'd rather be. Why not give your heart to Jesus for all eternity? All those years you have wandered with no place to go. If you're looking for contentment, I want you to know that my Jesus will give you that peace from above. Don't wait any longer for a taste of His love. I don't care why you came to be here tonight, and I don't care if you're thinking I'm wrong or I'm right. But don't you be thinking about some place you'd rather be. Why not give your heart to Jesus for all eternity? All the signs in this old world say He's coming back real soon. I don't know if it will be at night or at noon, but I'd like to be sure that I'll see you again on that great blissful morning when we sing the Amen. I don't care why you came to be here tonight, and I don't care if you're thinking I'm wrong or I'm right. But don't you be thinking about some place you'd rather be. Why not give your heart to Jesus for all eternity? Why not give your heart to Jesus for all eternity? Yes. Give your heart to Jesus for all eternity. Well, next program is the early years. Some of the difficulties, some of the joys, some of the pleasures. We shall see you next chapter.